If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members. Unlimited defense budgets, unmatched legal expertise. Carry the same level of support police officers have. Carry CCW Safe, the highest caliber.
We are back. I'm Chris Evan, the CEO of Survival Dispatch, where we speak directly to Americans who still believe in the Constitution, personal responsibility, and protecting what matters most, our families and our nation. While the legacy media continues to feed you distraction after distraction, we're here to cut through the noise and deliver the truth that actually affects your daily life and your future. Today, we're talking about a threat that goes straight to the heart of American sovereignty, an attack on our ability to feed ourselves and maintain independence from hostile foreign powers. I'm joined tonight by my co-host, Jeff MD, our in-house CIA operative, affectionately known as 007. And we've got our friend, Major Jeffrey Prather, back tonight. Really appreciate your time and your insight as per usual, Major. And we're going to break down what this latest Chinese infiltration really means for every American family, what you need to know to protect your family from agro-terrorism, and understand just how fragile our nation's food security is. This is actually a perfect time for you to stock up on high quality American freeze-dried meat from our new partner at Carnivalt. There's a link down below in the description. Here's the interesting thing. Nobody else is doing this, number one. Number two, there's no flavoring added. So when you add your flavoring and you rehydrate, reconstitute the meat, it absorbs it all. We've been eating this stuff for a little while now, and it's a brand new product from a brand new company. And if our food supply gets, attacked by terrorists, you want to have this on hand, because most of the products out there for stocking up as a prepper are not protein like this. These are also mRNA-free meats. They are grass finished, not just grass fed. Really interesting company, really good fit for our company at this particular point in time. Quick reminder, if you go to survivaldispatchnews.com, you can get a Guardian membership. It's only $7.99 a month or $74.99 a year. You get 2.5 months free. That works out to 21 cents per day. Benefits include you get Survival Dispatch emergency notifications, full daily sit reps, early access to content, 37 survival emags, the Sunday threat matrix, and access to our high traffic private signal chat. So with that being said, I want to pivot to the Major here, based on the fact that he's already written some content on this, which is quite interesting. Good timing. You're way ahead of the curve on this, Major. Give us your perspective on this particular incident. Is it real? Is it a false flag? If it's either, why is that the case? And then Jeff MD, feel free to jump in at any point.
Well, thanks for having me back, Chris. And hi, Jeff. So I think this is definitely a false flag. And recently I've been talking about how while Trump's team has not done very well, I'm very disappointed in Blathering Bongino and Puffery Patel. You're just media guys, and Bondi. Where's the precedent established to indict ex-presidents? So where's the indictment of Pedo Joe? Trump on his own is doing a lot. And I talked about this before with truce and treaties and and then his declaration in the Mideast where he didn't go and snubbed Israel and Netanyahu and said, we're not going to do made up Middle East wars anymore. That's a big funding cut for the global cabal, which is part of the deep state, the intelligence community. It's a big cut for the Zionist, Christian American, and Israeli. Then also trying to end Ukraine. He's having some trouble with that, but that will happen. That's another big deep state global cabal warmongering that's going away. So their funding is being cut off by that, plus his cartel wars as well. So I've been predicting that there will have to be an increase by the domestic deep state, which is FBI, CIA, Praetorian Guards, as in the Roman Praetorian Guards that decided who was Caesar, with domestic attacks. And actually back even in June of 2024, I did a show showing that the Congress had done a study predicting by July 2025 a bioterror attack. So whenever the corrupt Congress and the corrupt CIA, with present company excluded, Jeff, predict something, it's because they are going to make it happen. And so this looks like a big false flag for me. So, because again, when did this actual event happen? It happened last year in June. So all of a sudden they're indicting them now. I've done plenty of federal indictments. I arrested the guys. The next day I took them to initial appearances. The next day they were indicted. What's it taken a year for this? They're pulling this out. This is very much like the Obama OBL raid. They're pulling this out of their black bag at the time, because these two now, are they Chinese operatives? Well, sure they are. And it's very convenient that they find on their phone the declaration to the Communist Party. That's exactly what spies want to do, is have a declaration to the Communist Party on their phone.
Well, of course.
That's standard procedure, right, Jeff? You know, your
yeah, when I went overseas, I always put on my phone that, yes, I am a
right, Jeff?
CIA,
Yeah,
undercover CIA officer. Just in case anybody found it,
So, yeah, that is the crux of the matter, I feel, Major. Like, great job pointing that out.
There we are.
Like, overall, this is a legitimate threat, but this particular instance smells really, really fishy. Jeff MD, I want to hear your high-level view on this.
Well, I don't know a lot of the details, just what I've read in the off last couple of days. Yeah, if they're spies, they're not very good at it. That much is true. Now, could they be researchers who are trying to bring in something that they wouldn't normally be able to work on and bring it in from China? Yeah, they could be. We've seen a lot of thing about scientists, especially the really, really high level ones. They are arrogant as hell. And if somebody says, no, you can't we're not going to let you do that because it's not safe, or it's, it shouldn't be done. I think their attitude is, well, I'll decide what needs to be done. And then they'll do it anyway. Very arrogant. They can be very, very arrogant people, and they don't have a great deal of common sense. And you'll see this when they still defend gain of function research even after COVID. And you're like, well, we need to be doing this. Okay, listen to yourself. You want to create a disease that no one can treat. Yeah, what could possibly go wrong with that? But yeah, so they may have just been arrogant idiot researchers.
Well, I'm hopeful that we'll get to the bottom of it at some point in time. But I think, if nothing else, that at least it draws attention for the average American to the possibility of this thing happening and how important it is to be self-sufficient as best as you possibly can, and also recognize the signs of these types of funguses and what they do to you. Major, I'm going to play a piece from your recent podcast here. Let me know when you want me to stop it, but I've got it queued up at the 5:45 point that you asked for. So we're going to play that now. And then, like I said, just tell me to stop when you want me to.
Sure. On this yesterday. And this is from the Blueprint for Biodefense for 2024, came out in April. It's a government document. If you go down to the page 3 here, there's a scenario, and it reads, the following hypothetical opening remarks by the chair of Congressional Joint Inquiry provide context for this report by portraying a biological attack sufficient to cause the catastrophic consequences warned of by the Bipartisan Commission on Biodefense, them. The scenario describes how a biological agent could target humans and animals. Sounds like N151. And how it could emerge, some of the key interagency capabilities required to address the agent and its impacts and the consequences. And so this is just an imaginary scenario, but it's the joint inquiry into the administration and congressional actions before and during the bioterrorist attacks of July 4th, 2025. There you go. That's good. And so that's a tell.
I'll let you pick it up from there.
I mean, does it get more obvious than that? That they were planning this, and now I think they've been called out a lot by RFK. I think this is a modified version of that plan that they are bringing out. But this does a lot of things. This takes the heat off of Bongino and Patel for looking like the idiots that they are, and Bondi for her poor performance as well. It refocuses on the Chinese. And then all of a sudden, in the article, if you read the article in Zero Hedge, it says the FBI counterintelligence team, which isn't known for, let me find the quote, fooling around or something. I don't have it, but I said, except when you're after PTA moms, veterans, and Christians. And they talk about a Clancy-esque plot. They talk about the laughably clumsy smuggling attempt. And I think it was so laughably clumsy, so TSA wouldn't miss it and ICE wouldn't miss it, because their miss record is like 99%. If you don't know, every time I go through TSA, my wife's like, now calm down, because they're so incompetent. Plus, China is importing record numbers of our grain, our wheat, and especially the miraculous native crop corn that down in the Southwest was modified from the grain, the teosinte grass. So they really need this. They aren't, are there soldiers? Are there Chinese soldiers in America? Certainly. Are there Chinese special operations troops in America? Certainly. But I've said for a long time, the Chinese soldiers are there to keep the fields going, to keep the field workers going that they've been importing under Pedo Joe. The special operations troops are to hold the inflection points if they have to. That is the trucks, the trains, the shipping containers, the ports, and the ships, to get that stuff back to China. They have to get that stuff back to China. They do not want to destroy it. Again, when you're going to attack an objective, the first thing is, can we take the objective? And the second thing is, can we hold the objective? And so can we maintain the objective? That's why the mutually assured doctrine of war has worked so well. It was mutually assured destruction. So yeah, you could take out the enemy, but then you couldn't take the terrain because of the radioactivity. And so it worked out great. But there's no reason for the Chinese to do this. Their unrestricted warfare doctrine that started 20 years ago, after they watched us win the first Gulf War so fast that they said nobody can take the Americans kinetically head on, so we're not going to. We're going to take them every way which head on, has worked out fabulously for them. And it still is. It's a little rough under Trump, but he's willing to negotiate on this. So what this is, I think, is a deep state, but I also think the Chinese may have been behind this, but I kind of doubt it, because like Jeff said, the case officer that and by the way, there are case officers or tactical agent handlers, if you want to use DIA speak as opposed to CIA speak, who run scientists. I've done it. I've gone to conferences where we're sitting in the hotel room. We brief the scientist. He goes out to the conference. He's at the conference. He comes back in. We debrief the conference. It's English. It's hard for us to understand because it's very technical English. He understands it. But that happens. Right, Jeff?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Because they have the expertise that you don't. They have a PhD in, electrical engineering or whatever you need. And they have the gravitas, so to speak. They've got a reputation. People know who they are. They're usually well known in their field. They have access to people that they've known sometimes for decades.
Yeah, here's the quote. Here I found the quote. the FBI counterintelligence division, not known for chasing shadows. And in my Substack, I say just veterans, patriots, and PTA moms. So all of a sudden, FISA, FARA, no Epstein indictments, Waco, Ruby Ridge, everything else. Now, all of a sudden, we're supposed to trust that the FBI counterintelligence division is on the job. Sorry, not buying that.
Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me, right?
Yeah.
So I want to quickly thank Not a Fish Stick for the $4.99 tip. Thank you very much. It's very much appreciated. I'm going to take us down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, and I'd like to hear from both of you on this. So when you were speaking towards kinetic war between us and China potentially, Pete Hegseth, when he was running for the nomination, a number of times said that we've run simulations countless times and we've lost each time. In the kerfuffle that broke out between India and Pakistan last month, it's been reported that all of the weapons from China completely failed. And I did some further reading on it, and it turns out pretty much every country out there who's bought what are supposed to be advanced weaponry and planes and whatnot from China have had to shut down the entire program. They've had to have it replaced because their failure rate is just astronomical. I'm curious what you both of you think. If we ran a simulation today, knowing what we know now with regard to Chinese technology failing so dramatically, what do you think that looks like, Major? And then you, Jeff.
Well, we touched on this last time I was on, is because it's a tyranny and they control production from the top up, and it's not entrepreneurial, their stuff doesn't work. And this is what we were talking about, aircraft carriers. They're trying to get a blue water navy going, and there's only a few countries sophisticated enough to have aircraft carriers, because you have to have systemology. That is, you have to have systems to run all the systems, because an aircraft carrier is a little floating Air Force, Army, and Navy all in itself. And that's how you project superpower power overseas. And they can't do it. Now we're having trouble. Ours is declining now. We keep pushing F-35s off of carriers into the waters and running into each other at sea. That's difficult to do as well. But they've never done it. And they keep catching fire. And with the India and Pakistan stuff is typical. A couple of years back, they got into not in India and Pakistan, China, India and Pakistan got into it. They went close quarter, and India kicked their asses. They broke some of their necks, and they had big parties and celebrations. The Chinese tried to cover it up. So Hegseth is, I like Hegseth. He's doing a lot of right stuff, but no more training troops, fit, not fat. But the assessment that China would beat us is absurd. It would not happen. They also just don't have the will. Now our troops, there's low morale, but there's an institutional memory of 20 years of GWAD of veterans, that combat experience and that combat hardening. Now, most of those guys are retiring now, but there's still a lot of institutional memory in there for that. So I disagree totally with Hegseth. I think this is a budget thing. This is what everybody always does. We did this with the Soviets. The Soviet stuff wasn't that good. Jeff will, I'm sure, affirm me on this.
Yes, many times.
Yeah.
We overestimated the Soviet capability. Why? For budgets.
There's a couple of things here at play here. One, I think the Chinese, and like the Russians had some interesting stuff. They could build one of anything. They couldn't mass produce squat. And part of the problem is, they sit there and they make a prototype and they tweak it and they spend, 10 years building this thing. And then when it goes in time to do mass production, they can't, it doesn't work. And the Chinese, I think, are the same way. But what the problem is with these, one, I think you're right about the budget thing. Yeah, they're doing it to get more money. But the other thing is, and we saw this with the Russians, and we saw it to a certain extent with Iraq as well. We assumed that, they go into these things assuming that their weapon systems are going to work as advertised, that they're going to do what the Chinese claim they can do. and they never do. And the thing we did, we found out with the Russians is like one of the reasons we grossly overestimated their military capacity is they lied to themselves. If you have a quota and you don't make it, you're in deep shit.
Right. That's exactly right.
What they would do is they would lie, tell Moscow they made their quota, and those tanks are parked out back in the lot. Okay. And then take a picture of them, and they'd be the same ones they'd take a picture of next year too. And so we would intercept, the CIA would get their hands on some of these production reports and things like that from these factories, and we just assumed they were telling the truth.
Yeah,
because our factories say, we delivered X number of tanks, and and if they didn't, the Army would say we didn't get them, but over there no one checked. And in what happened in Iraq is, like, we thought they were a lot closer to a nuclear weapon than they were, because their nuclear scientists were lying to the government, because if they told the truth, Saddam would kill them. So they said, we're making great progress. Yeah, we'll be ready to do it in a year. Well, they were just trying to save their own skin. And I think what you have with the Chinese, the same kind of thing. They'll deploy it, they'll put a missile out there so they can say, we've got, 10 missile silos with missiles in them. Well, we found out some of the missiles were actually filled with water instead of fuel. And North Korea did the same thing. They would have these stockpiles of fuel to be used in war. Well, what they were doing is they're putting water in the tanks, and the water sinks to the bottom, and the gasoline and the diesel floats. And then they would siphon off diesel and sell it on the black market. When you needed more, you put another 100 gallons of water into the tank and take out another 100 gallons of diesel and go sell it on the black market. So when they get down to the wartime, you got a 50,000 gallon tank and maybe have 5,000 gallons of diesel in it, and the rest is water. Because there's corruption, and then there's corruption on making money, and there's corruption to stay alive. And if it's your life, you'll tell your boss whatever you got to tell him to keep him from killing you.
Interesting.
That's a great point, Jeff, because that brings it a point to a very subtle thing in the intelligence community is sometimes the source, the intelligence source, is so valued because the intelligence was solid. they were intercepting the good stuff, but they were lying. It was lying.
It's like counting airplanes with a satellite. You go, okay, well, here's a bomber base in Russia, and we counted 150 Bear bombers. Doesn't mean they can fly. It just means they're sitting there.
Right. Yeah. That's where the intelligence analysis comes in. But sometimes,
or more important, you recruit an asset who has direct access to that base and can say, those planes can't fly. Half of them don't have engines in them.
Yeah. But too often in the intelligence community, it's just, hey, the source said this, so the source is taken as gospel.
But you got to verify. But
anybody who's running informants or sources knows they're great liars. Because they get paid more too by you.
But you got to, that's why you vet and you run independent sources and you compare one guy's reporting to another guy's reporting. They don't know each other, so their stories don't drive.
Or they'll start running you. High-level forces will start running you unless you run them.
But you can't have, satellites are great, but they're not the be-all, end-all.
That's right.
They can take a picture of an airplane. They can't tell you it'll fly.
All intelligence is ultimately humans.
Yeah.
Couple quick comments before we move on to get Fox News's take on this. Number one, the Chinese have 3 aircraft carriers. One of them is a Russian cargo ship that was converted to an aircraft carrier. It's very small. And the planes, they have a choice, either 50% of the fuel or 50% of the munitions, but not 100% of either, because it's not big enough for them to get off. The other 2 that they have built, one of them has a ski jump at the end. And we've seen multiple times where their J-35, which is a ripoff of our plane, going bloop into the water, much like the Major mentioned. But the biggest reason that I've found on that topic, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but we've embargoed the technology for the EMP launch system that is essentially a slingshot that fires our planes off of the aircraft carriers. And supposedly nobody has that. And for once, apparently we've done a good job of stopping that technology from getting into the bad guys' hands. And then another couple quick comments. As far as Chinese culture is concerned, there's a couple big things here. Number one, innovation in China is considered akin to gambling, and you should never do it. So you should rip off IP from other people, and they've been doing that since the 80s. And the second thing is, one of you two will remember where this was, and I've mentioned it before, so I'll be brief, but there was a UN peacekeeping mission somewhere in Africa, 2015-ish time frame. It was a Chinese turn to, be the peacekeepers, and they got their asses handed to them by a bunch of tribesmen with AK-47s. And the reason that happened, it was the middle of the night in China, and as this was happening, nobody would make leadership decisions until their leader, chimed in and gave, and that's their Achilles heel in their culture. Whereas we've mentioned this many times, and Major Prather's father was a World War II vet, just recently passed, God bless his soul. I'm sure the Major can attest to this as well as Jeff, is that the Germans despised fighting us in World War II for a very specific reason. Their doctrine was take out the enemy's leader, whether it's a squad or a platoon or bigger, and that's it. They give up and you take over. But for the American fighting men at that point in time, next guy just stepped up to fill the role immediately as the leader and kept on pressing forward. So I don't know if you want to speak to that or not, Major. By all means, go ahead and do so.
No, I do actually, and it's apropos because this is the anniversary of the kickoff of Midway. Which when everything changed, where the Japanese had been kicking our asses across the Pacific. Japanese had never been defeated ever. And then with great intelligence, with AF identified, everything changed in one afternoon. But you're exactly right. On D-Day, key leaders, young platoon sergeants and platoon lieutenants were up and moving around. And as they got killed off, this platoon sergeant or the squad leader took over where the German guys stayed in place and lacked initiative. And that's the great thing about the American military, the backbone, the non-commissioned officers and the initiative shown. And, that's exemplified by, Audie Murphy, goes from private to first lieutenant by the end of the war because everybody else is dead. But you're exactly right about that. And if you have looked into Midway, and the latest Midway movie is really good, very accurate, you'll see where Yamamoto, the genius, who didn't want to fight us, who liked us, but once he was told to fight us, he, saluted and carried out his orders. He thought that Nagumo was an idiot because he didn't go after the fuel tanks, while everybody in Japan, thought he was a hero. And then when they were doing the planning, the young planner lays off Midway and wins, and he says, no, run the scenario again and go back. So the Japanese mentality, I've spent a lot of time in Japan because I've trained in Japanese martial arts since 1967, is very similar to the Chinese mentality, of the upstanding nail must be hammered down. But yeah, that's a really good point as well. But I do want to add that there, and this is not, this attack is not the typical democide attack nor ecocide attack. The U.S. government has done democide multiple times. It just finished doing it with the bioweapons. But all you got to do is ask the tribes. I have Inde Apache heritage, and the ecocide of the tribes corresponded with the democide of the tribes. They killed off the Indian ponies. They killed off the buffalo, which was the source of food, to completely change the ecosystem, because buffaloes don't respect fences, but cattle do. If you're going to be a farm culture as we are now, you can't have buffalo. You can't have both. It doesn't work. So there is ecocide and there is democide, but this attack ain't it. This attack is, high probability false flag.
So I'm not going to tell the whole story. I've told it before, but I'm pretty convinced that the concept of leadership being drilled into young people's heads is pretty uniquely American. And I had a debate with some Germans over this years ago, and I said, look, they were with Mercedes. They were stationed out of Raleigh, North Carolina. And I said, have you seen our young children playing American style football? And they said, yeah. And I said, well, when one of the players on one team who's not wearing the captain's jersey extends a hand to help up a player from the other team, in that snapshot in time, that young child is displaying leadership. And we absolutely drill that into our children's heads. And we have this concept of leadership that I don't think any other country has. And I'm not trying to insult anybody else. I'm not saying there's not good leaders elsewhere. I'm talking the culture of leadership as far as being permeating our entire society, except for those crazy people who, turn their hair blue, is uniquely American. Jeff MD, do you want to comment on that before we move on to Fox News's take on this?
No, I think you guys covered it.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so let's hear what Fox News has to say. It's 1 minute and 52 seconds long. I'll probably play the entire video because it's a good synopsis of what's going around in the legacy media right now.
Breaking tonight, 2 Chinese nationals have been charged with smuggling a dangerous biological pathogen into the United States. And this pathogen is considered a serious threat to our food supply and thus our national security. Fox's David Spunt is here with all the details. David, this is terrifying.
Laura, it really is quite an interesting story. According to the Justice Department, one of them worked at a laboratory connected to the University of Michigan. The FBI arrested 33-year-old Yu Qing Zhan for allegedly smuggling in a fungus called Fusarium graminearum, which could be used as an agro-terrorism weapon. The gases from the fungus could cause liver damage, vomiting, and reproductive defects in humans and livestock. DOJ officials say Zhan has direct ties to the Chinese Communist Party, and she works at the University of Michigan, and her boyfriend is connected to a university back in China. FBI Director Kash Patel, in an exclusive statement to Fox Digital, says this case is a sobering reminder that the Chinese Communist Party continues to deploy operatives and researchers to infiltrate our institutions and target our food supply, an act that could cripple our economy and endanger American lives. Smuggling a known agro-terrorism agent into the U.S. is not just a violation of law, it's a direct threat to national security. I commend the FBI Detroit Division and our partners at CPB for stopping this biological threat before it could do real damage. Now, senior DOJ leaders, Laura, are debating whether to bring back the so-called China Initiative, a controversial program during the Bill Barr Justice Department that aimed to stop Chinese espionage that began in American universities. The DOJ under Merrick Garland got rid of the name after groups came forward and complained it was insensitive, but I'm told the current Attorney General Pam Bondi and her team want to focus on China, though it's unclear if they'll bring the China Initiative name back. Laura.
Jeff MD, I'm going to go to you first. I didn't hear anything there with regards to this happening 6 months ago.
Yeah, that's that kind of leaving that part up. I think the timing of this is convenient. I think, and could it be a legit threat? Absolutely. I mean, we've looked at bioterrorism, for against agriculture for years, but the fact that they're trying to stop Chinese, student visas from being issued, is a little too convenient for me. But yeah, it's easy to smuggle in biological agents. I have news for you. I have transported them myself on commercial air flights, and nobody had a clue. But it is it's a legitimate concern. But was this sort of the Chinese master plan? Yeah, I don't know. Do they steal our technology? Absolutely, they steal our technology. They have, when I went to, when I was in Atlanta, my boss said, he says, yeah, you're going to work this account for a while, and I want your thoughts, because I think there's a Chinese intel cell operating on or near that campus. And I worked the account for, a couple, 3 months, and when his office, they go, yeah, there's definitely something going on down there. And the FBI, I don't know if they were aware of it, but I mean, they were looking at it just like we were, and they had the primary jurisdiction on that one. We can't arrest anybody, but yeah, they're definitely out here, and they're looking at all of our universities. They're stealing all sorts of technology from schools, from companies, you name it. So, yeah, could they be doing this? Absolutely, they could be doing this. Is it a potential threat to the country? Sure. You want to destroy the cattle industry? Enter it as a rinderpest. That's a disease indigenous to Africa. If it got into our system, it'd be a nightmare. Be billions and billions of dollars in damage.
Appreciate the firsthand information. Major, before I pivot to you, I see there's a discussion going on in some of the chats with regards to Chinese drones. Just want to add a couple quick things. Number one, 2 days before Trump's inauguration, DJI forced an update on all of their drones. So here's the deal. If you have a DJI drone and an update is released for it, you can't get it in the air until you apply the update. And the update that was pushed out to DJI drones 2 days before Trump's inauguration removed all of the geofencing around restricted airspaces. So what that means is prior to that point in time, you could not fly a DJI drone into restricted airspace, but now you can. And here's the kicker. Those drones that fly not just unrestricted airspace are doing an ET, calling home and sending all of that information and intel directly back to the CCP. Are multiple government policies that forbid the use of DJI drones, and they're being largely ignored by a number of agencies. So it's a pretty bad situation with these drones, and so many of them being DJIs, and so many of them, all of them for that matter, sending information back to the CCP. Major, is there anything in the legacy news piece there that struck you?
So it's funny because I used to be on Laura Ingram's show back when I was exposing when I was whistleblowing. And when Brian Terry's murder trial came about, and the DOJ was trying to exclude the 2 AK-47 murder weapons that killed BORTAC Border Patrol agent Brian Terry, 45 minutes from my home, and I deployed with BORTAC because I was DEA snowcap. And when I started exposing that the Fast and Furious emails went right to Eric Holder in the White House, she stopped having me on. So, she has sold out, and this is just, as far as I'm concerned, confirmation, because she started the story. This is terrifying, which was, really bad acting, I think, but she's doing her best. But again, this does not suit the Chinese at all. How does this help advance the Chinese? It doesn't. There's no scenario that this fits.
Well, I think you're right. And I would argue that at this particular point in time, it just became crystal clear to the world as far as how fragile China's economy is. We've been saying for the past 3 years that China is on very thin ice. So I have people that I've worked with for years or in China on a regular basis. 2 years ago, one of them, Perry's name, he said to me, the Chinese government is telling their citizens that 40% of their plants are closed. He said it's the exact opposite. 60% of their plants are closed. People are fleeing the cities and going back to the countryside because before their industrial revolution, which we powered in the 1980s, they were a nation of farmers. So they've all gone back to farming to try to feed their families. And originally this year, the prediction was that China would hit a 19 trillion GDP this year. Will far exceed 31 trillion. They're going to have a hard time making 15 trillion. And when we had the high tariffs in place before we hit the pause button, we do a lot of work with Chinese companies. I personally lost over $40,000 in educational videos that we get every year, contracts we get every year at the beginning of hurricane season to produce for these companies and make power stations and other devices because they were dead in the water. So I'm with the major on this one. There's no way that this is in China's best interest whatsoever, because if they take us out on a large scale, it's kind of like, they're killing themselves at the same time. What do they call it? Harry Carey or something like that? Go ahead, Jeff.
Harakiri, seppuku.
Yeah.
Yes. That's Japanese though.
I just looked it up. According to the USDA website, China imports $113 billion worth of foodstuffs every year. Okay, if you take out the United States agriculture, we're one of the largest, if not the largest, producer of exportable food in the world. Then that's food they can't import. And on top of that, what would happen to the world market for any grains, for soybeans, for corn, for rice, or anything else, if we got hit with this biological agent and disrupted our supply? The prices go through the roof. Well, if you're the country, if you're the country that is the largest importer of food in the world, do you really want to see a price increase? Yeah, this doesn't make any sense because they'd be poisoning our crops. That's also their crops because they eat that stuff too. And what we would produce, then we'd probably say, well, we're going to feed our people first. And if we found out that the Chinese were behind it, we sure as hell wouldn't be selling them any food. So this is shooting themselves in the foot. That's why it doesn't make a lot of sense.
100%. So really interesting timing for this comment from LFCam. I totally know that many of the Chinese students in our universities, mainly in the Ivy League, are veterans of the PLA, so People's Liberation Army, and they're indoctrinated at an early age, say 5 or 6 years old. I'm not going to read this article from the DOJ, but the takeaway from this article with the DOJ is that our post-secondary institutions are heavily infiltrated by Chinese agents of one type or another. And again, I agree with the Major and Jeff on this, that this is a very fishy report, but that doesn't negate the fact, like the Major said earlier, they have plenty, China has plenty of assets in our country in positions that, pose a danger to us and can exploit our weaknesses. So let's just move ahead to this next one here from Zero Hedge. And this gets into more specifics as far as this fungus and what it can do. So it's capable of wreaking havoc on wheat, barley, maize, rice crops. It can also poison humans and livestock because it has these toxic byproducts. And what comes out of that primarily is liver damage, plus a host of other things like, vomiting, headaches, so on and so forth. I'd never heard of this fungus prior to this, but this seems like a very different biological agent, let's say, than anthrax. I think one's on one end of the scale that is like a big river full of energy, and the anthrax is kind of like a small, really sharp stream that can inflict quick damage. Would that analysis stand, Major?
Yes, certainly.
Do you have any particular knowledge on these funguses? Because I'd never heard of this myself.
No, I don't. But again, first off, it doesn't suit the Chinese. So then the question becomes, who does it suit? What does it suit Trump's agenda? Well, yeah, it does, because he's leveraging, negotiating with China via his tariff wars against the 20 years of unrestricted warfare. He's the first person to do that. He's being very successful. I think he's doing a great job. So would Trump be in favor of this? Yes, sure. Why not? Who else would this help? Well, this would make the FBI look a lot better because they made an arrest. Finally, this looks like CBP doing something. This looks like TSA doing something. Patel comes out with a statement, so he doesn't look like an idiot, which, he is really. So this really fits a lot of people's agenda to pull this out right now. But as far as agents all over the place, and certainly at Michigan, which we've seen through election sabotage, that's the 1,000 Talents program. The unrestricted warfare doctrine, 20 years ago, initiated by two Chinese Air Force colonels, was vectored via the Chinese 1,000 Talents program, which was basically flooding the United States with foreign students, with doctors, with scientists, with university professors, exchange programs, and they all have relatives back in China. And this is what they do. If you're going to run cocaine, how you run cocaine is, okay, give me your address and give me a photograph of your family. And then your family is held hostage until the cocaine is delivered. And basically that's what they're saying here with the 1,000 Talents programs, because everybody has relatives back in China. In fact, I have a recent situation where there was a conversation almost exactly like this with somebody who had to betray an American company that had Chinese descent that did not want to, but it was about, the person made it clear that it was about their relatives back in China. So it's not that these are really highly trained case officers or tactical agent handlers or anything, but all these people have been contacted. They've been, before they go, they're contacted, when they're here, and they're activated as needed. And then the extortion piece of it is, hey, you want your kids or your family or your mom or dad, to be okay, back in Mother China. And that happens all the time. That's why the unrestricted warfare has been so successful. And the 1,000 Talents program is genius. Both of this 5th generation war and this intelligence program have worked out excellently for them.
I have a question for you, Major, and then I have a different question for Jeff, MD. So you don't just decide one day that you're going to leave China. You have to have permission to travel abroad. And it was first uncovered, as far as I know, that there were Chinese police stations in Canada that were essentially keeping tabs on Chinese citizens in Canada and policing them. Then we got the news that this also existed here in the United States. New York was the very first one that I recall being mentioned. Give me your thoughts on that, Major, as far as the Chinese policing their citizens around the world. I mean, it kind of speaks to what you just did. Like, you either play ball or we have the ability to touch you no matter where you are. Is that the gist of it?
Yeah. Those Chinese stations, and there were in New York, and they were in all the major cities in America, were the enforcement arm for the 1,000 Talents program to execute the unrestricted warfare doctrine. But within those Chinese stations, those guys just aren't Chinese cops. They are also Chinese intelligence personnel as well. And I'm sure Jeff will agree with me on that as well, because they're also liaisoning with American police and trying to infiltrate. Because when you're in a foreign country, who you want to recruit? You want to recruit a police chief, you want to recruit a mayor, you want to recruit a general, you want to recruit a president if you can, like Noriega, like the deep state did with Pedo Joe. So that the Chinese police stations are bases to do all of that from.
I appreciate the extra insight on that. Go ahead, Jeff.
No, they were also a way to exfil the information they were collecting. Because, if you had a Chinese researcher at MIT and he gets some really good stuff, you don't want to wait for him to go home next summer to get that. He's got to have a way to get it out. Now, if it's just information, he might be able to get it out through the through the internet somehow. But what if he's acquired a physical sample of something, like a computer chip or something? He's got to be able to pass that off to somebody who can then turn around and get it back home. And that's what those police stations are perfect for. It's, you go, they contact, what do you got? I got a chip. Great. Meet up, give it to me, go on, do more. And then they take the chip and send it back to Beijing. It's, it's like having an embassy in every city.
So, question for you, Jeff, before we move on. This story, this agro-terrorism story, was at the very top of my news list this morning when I got up. It was the very first one. And I did not have time to investigate a couple things that I really wanted to, but the Major made a good point when he stated, who does this benefit? You drew attention to it as well. So I don't have the answer to this. Maybe you guys do. But is there any way that this scenario could potentially benefit Bill Gates, Monsanto, BlackRock, those types of players?
Well, anybody who develops antifungal chemicals, yeah, they could make money on it. Or, it's just like, who benefited from COVID? Well, the vaccine manufacturers are the ones who benefited from COVID. Well, if there was an issue with this, then if the guys who can develop the chemicals or the drugs or whatever's necessary to combat it or rectify it, make the money.
Chairman Mao says you are not allowed to say that, Jeff, MD.
Well,
I'm just saying. Next thing you know, you'll be exfilled to China.
Just win it out. Look who's making money on it.
100%. We've got a note here from Sarah. She's an awesome follower, prolific writer. Explosion in California fertility clinic reported an hour ago. 2 guys, one obviously Oriental. I'll see if I can find anything on that when I have a moment here. The next page that I've got up is the USDA National Bio and Agro Defense Facility. And this page speaks to the work that they're doing here to protect the food supply chain, crops, and things of that nature. I'm curious from both of you. So question to both of you, Major first, is how vulnerable is our food supply? Like, let's just set aside that, yes, looks like a false flag. There really doesn't look like anything that would benefit China. But how significant is this vulnerability?
Well, first, let me go back to, because in my Substack, I actually address your last question to Jeff, and Gates and the pedo elite are for ecocide because they are for vertical urban farm, PHARM, grown foodstuffs. But like the current biotech bust, that too is designed to fail spectacularly. So what Gates and everything want is very short growing seasons through drugs vertically in the city, in the failing urban centers that are going to clearly fail, and they want to replace all the farmlands. So they are for ecocide, and they are certainly for democide, but the Chinese are not. The Chinese want to maintain everything. So that's an important point. But
hold on, before you go on, I got to ask you a question before you pivot to something else. So we're getting both feet in the rabbit hole here. Does this tie into Bill Gates's funding and plans to block a portion of the sun by putting particulates in the air to lower the temperature of Earth? Because we're all going to die from global warming, in case you didn't get the memo. But would that tie into that initiative as well? Like, how would that, I'm sure it does, but how would that benefit Bill Gates, Monsanto, the rest of them?
So they want, it's all satanically sourced. And I'm a Christian chaplain. So, and the adversary mimics the creator. And then the adversary gets back at the creator by destroying the creation and the creatures in the creation, because the adversary can't get back at the creator directly. So that's the very high level view answer, but that goes to blocking the sun. How can blocking the sun be a good idea? It can't be in any way, but they have seen where there are ozone holes, and so they may be trying to do that. That's the only legitimate. It's bad, of course. I'm against it, but the chemtrails, which had ceased a little bit because there are rumors of arrests, and they were actually Air Force personnel. There are units that do regular chemtrailing, but these were the covert chemtrailing. But that looks like part of it. And that's a radical ecocide transformation of everything. And that includes poisoning the soil, poisoning the waters, poisoning the sky. But that's
let me ask you another quick question before you. I just want to catch you before you pivot again. I'm old enough to remember when Mount St. Helens went off, and all the environmentalists lost their shit, saying that it was going to have a negative global impact on all kinds of things, including agriculture, because what did it do? All that ash in the air, it blocked a portion of the sun, just like now they're proposing. It seems kind of they're talking out of both sides of their mouth for those people who are paying attention. Back to you. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. I just want to get you, because you go so fast from one topic to another. For somebody like me who's not as smart as you, it takes me a minute to catch up.
Sorry. So actually, I was at Fort Lewis when Mount St. Helens was going off. But anyway, how serious is this as a strategic danger to our crop? It's not. Our crops are too vast and too resilient. But just like the water supply, it's poisoned, but it's not through dropping some poison into it. There's dilution with all of that to a huge degree. But the real answer here, as the American empire fades, and it is fading, like the British Empire faded. All you got to read is Sir James Glubb's Fate of Empires. At 250 to 270 years, they all fall, and we are there. Is everybody goes back to their farms. like Cincinnatus. Cincinnatus saves Rome as the general, and then what's he do? I don't want power. I go back to my farm. The only guy to do that after Cincinnatus was Washington, because there are very few guys who will go back to their farm and give up power. But everybody's going to be forced to go back to their farm as our urban infrastructures and our intrastate infrastructures continue to fail as the empire fails. And all you got to do is go to Britain and look at how things are like 40 years behind there. And that used to be the power that controlled the seas and had colonies and everything. And so that will be the real redundancies, is going back to small farms. So big agriculture certainly can be sabotaged, but all the resiliency of the small farms cannot. That becomes the ultimate resistance movement, is farmer citizen resistance.
So here's an interesting number for you, and then Jeff, I'll get your comments on this as well. But at the end of World War II, 50% of Americans got the bulk of their fresh vegetables and fruits from their backyard. And that number is now less than 1%. And since we're going down all these different rabbit holes, y'all may recall that the USDA was trying to get people to license their garden in their backyards. And now that seems even more nefarious to me than it did at the time. I mean, it struck me as government overreach, but I think it goes beyond that. Jeff, let's get your comments in general as far as the size of the threat. And I'm not saying that you disagree with the major, but I'd like to hear it in your words, as well as the fact of being licensed to use your own garden.
Well, being licensed to use your own garden is just stupid, but government will take whatever power it could get. Just don't be dumb enough to give it to them in the first place. Our agricultural system I worry about what we're doing that is more self-inflicted in the name of, oh my God, we got to stop this. Look at the egg situation. Okay, bird flu came in. They slaughtered 10 million laying hens. Why? Oh, we got to stop the spread of this disease. How's it going to spread? Chickens don't fly. A chicken in a barn is a chicken in a barn. He's not going to fly to the next chicken farm and spread the disease. So how about we just let it run its course? Maybe you lose half the chickens, but you know what? The other half will have survived the infection and will be immune to the infection. And let's selectively breed, so to speak, for chickens who are naturally resistant to the flu. If you kill everything, we did this with the, there was a fungus that went after the chestnut trees in America. America had 1 in 4 trees east of the Mississippi were chestnut trees, 25%. Big, beautiful trees, lots of food. They dropped chestnut, great building material. Well, this blight comes in. It was a fungus, came from Europe, and it attacked the trees. So what was our solution? Cut down all the chestnut trees. And the USDA said, salvage what you can. Cut down all your chestnut trees. Cut them up for lumber. Use them for telephone poles. Do, whatever you got to do. Well, that was stupid, because if there were any chestnuts that were immune to the blight, you just killed them all with a chainsaw. And there actually is a huge chestnut tree in Kentucky, which is the largest surviving chestnut tree in America. And it has never been affected by the blight. And they're trying to actually clone it now and do other things. But it's like we're doing that with our chickens. We're killing them off before we can figure out how they survive. But you got, but these fungus can get into crops. But there's antifungal chemicals and things like that. And they don't, if they killed everything all the time, we wouldn't have agriculture. I mean, there's fungus everywhere. Sometimes they're bad. There's wheat smut. There's all this other different funguses that can infect crops, but there are ways to counteract it. It infects a field. A lot of times you just burn that field and then, replant and you move on. That will kill the fungus.
Well,
so I worry more about the animal side of it. Like we've seen with these idiots who want to kill all the chickens. If we had rinderpest in here, it would wipe out our cattle industry. You get hoof and mouth. Their whole solution to hoof and mouth is to wipe out entire herds of, of cattle, of horses, of pigs that get infected with it, rather than, treat it or vaccinate for it.
So here in Florida, this is the mold capital of the world, not just the country. There's more mold here in Florida than anywhere else. And my wife got very, very sick from being exposed to mold in Sarasota a few years ago. And it had really, really bad effects on her. But back to the bird flu just for a second. So I think there were 10 million chickens killed in December, but in the 6 months leading up to that, it was something like 100 million chickens total. I had a really nice follower of ours email me because I said that there were no confirmed cases of bird flu that any of these chickens had during that 6 month period. And he wrote to me, he worked for a company that had something to do with this. And he said, well, there was this case that happened. It was somewhere in central Georgia, like Augusta or something like that. And then he got back to me the very next day and he says, oh, I misspoke. He said the incident in Augusta or close to Augusta where this chicken had H1N1 was actually in 2017. And it was just a couple birds. It was isolated, like you pointed out. So the crazy thing about the culling the chickens is that it was 100% designed to make Donald Trump and the Trump administration look bad. They knew last August that they were going to get their asses handed to them and that they couldn't cheat enough to overcome the tsunami of votes for Donald Trump. But we're just over an hour, so I'm going to really quickly breeze through this. So here's an article from 2004 on agro-terrorism, okay? Here's another one from 2007. And here's another one from 2012. And here's another one from India. And I'll just briefly read the one from India, and then I'll get y'all's comments on this. So this is a current article based on the 2 Chinese nationals being charged here. But this basically says, it's kind of interesting. It's terrifying, Major. It's absolutely terrifying. Our farm fields the new battlefields. U.S. seems to have averted an agricultural disaster, blah, 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 blah. But this devastating form of terrorism has taken root in several countries, including India in recent years, known as agro-terrorism. And here's what happened, the current story here in America. But then it goes on to describe how India has been a victim right there. So in India, the agricultural sector contributes around 17% of the country's GDP. As per the 2011 census, around 55% of the population is engaged in agriculture and related activities. Moreover, with key agricultural states like Punjab, Rajasthan, Himachal, whatever, Pradesh, sharing their borders with hostile neighbors like Pakistan and China, the threat of agro-terrorism is even more real. According to a research paper published by the Defense Research and Development Organization in 2016, a toxic fungus reported in Bangladesh was found in 2 districts of West Bengal. However, the government contained the spread of, I can't even pronounce this thing. It's got an acronym, MOT, a wheat blast causing fungus by banning wheat cultivation in the 2 districts for 3 years. Moreover, cultivation within 5 kilometers, 3 miles of the international border and other districts adjoining Bangladesh was prohibited. The pest was believed to have been deliberately introduced into the Indian agro ecosystem, but there's been no concrete evidence. Major, I'll go to you for comments on that. I just realized I didn't even have that particular page up. Sorry. There it is right there.
Well, the key there is it was artificially induced. And to go back to what you're talking about, the chickens, is no farmer is bringing their chickens in to the federal government, getting them tested, and then they're saying, hey, you've got chicken fungus flu disease. What's happening is you got if people are stupid enough to let government guys come into their chicken farms, then they're planting something in there, or with a lot of tests, they take the chicken, test negative on the spot, they take it back to the lab, their government lab, and all of a sudden it tests positive. That's exactly what happened with the pandemic. And Giordino, you can watch Giordino talk about this to government classes, is you go over to different countries and you surreptitiously poison a couple of people so that they fall down on screen. Remember people at the beginning of the pandemic falling over dramatically? Then what happened after a while? Where's all the rest of the people falling over? What happened? What changed? No, a couple of guys were injected, and all intelligence agencies do this: balloons or umbrellas, syringes, pens. It's very common. You knock a couple of people down, and then you say, pandemic. And then you say, we've identified it. And you've got to take the vaccine, which is the real bioweapon, because COVID was simply the flu. And then you've got them. And it's the same scenario with all of this. So on our own, we'll be fine. Now, some of the big agricultural centers can be mass infected because everything's close, like the chicken farms. They're all together, so they can get sick because they're all together in one place. But the small individual farmers will be the resilient resistance that you cannot stop, and that's why we're going to go back to that eventually. And I'm fine with that. That's how I read Revelation: is the woman is carried into the wilderness on the wings of eagles. The wings of eagles, I think, are America. The wilderness, I think, is America. We're not really even mentioned in Revelation. I think we're a sideshow, and I'm just happy with that because I'm a country boy, so I'm fine.
So, Major, I'm sure you can attest to this. One of the other reasons that I've been told that our military is so effective is that you can't fight if you're hungry. And I've been told by a number of people that we excel at getting food to our frontline troops like no other country in the world. And it's kind of interesting. I think it's 11-to-1 ratio, right? 11 support personnel to the guys on the front line who are carrying the guns. Just curious, does that sound right to you as far as us being that efficient at getting food to the front lines?
Oh, yeah. It's amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics. And the tail is 3 to 10 times as much as the teeth. It's not sexy, but it's necessary, and we are great at that. And that goes with systemology as well. We can be too good at that, where we make things too nice. We end up having pizza parlors and pools because we're staying so long. We shouldn't be staying so long. It should be hard conditions. Palmarola in Honduras, I was there when it was just a couple of sandbags, and went back years later and they got pools and pizza. We've been there too long. We should not have stayed, but that's entrepreneurialism and capitalism springing up. There's ghettos like that around all military bases. There always have been. I'm sure there was some woman selling spiked wine to Roman centurion troops alongside the battlefield. But yeah, that's certainly true. We do that really, really well.
Well, Stalin once said, quantity has a quality all its own. And that was in response to the German tanks are nicer than yours. And he said, yeah, but we got a whole bunch. And, but it's like, I would rather have 2 hamburgers or 10 hamburgers than 1 steak if I'm trying to stay alive over time. But yeah, we do, we're great at logistics and supplying stuff, but you got to be.
Yeah, I appreciate the firsthand account from both of you on that. Just wanted to give props to AD 33, AD 2033. Don't forget the crisis actors. He or she, I don't know which it is, made that comment when you were describing the people falling over in China that showed just how horrible this thing was, right? So the very last one that I put into the brief for us tonight was agro-terrorism refers to acts aimed at attacking crops or livestock to create uncertainty regarding food supply and to inflict economic damage on the agricultural sector. Unlike traditional biological warfare, which targets humans directly, agro-terrorism focuses on infecting animals or plants, leading to potential harm for humans and eroding public confidence in food supplies. And I like how we didn't even get to this point, and both of you had already hit on, taking out the animals is a lot easier to do than taking out the crops, I guess, as you would say. And I'm going to give another prop here to the guys at Carnivalt, carnivalt.com. There's a coupon on there. I think you get 10% off. We do not get affiliate compensation from them, but really high end, 100% American meat products that have been freeze dried, no mRNA in them, grass finished, not just grass fed. Check them out at carnivalt.com. It's really, really good stuff for a whole bunch of reasons. It's great for preppers because now you have an awesome source of protein that you can flavor however you want. They don't put any flavoring in it. And here's the thing, if you take somebody like me, every time one of these companies sends me stuff like that, I go, I should probably put that away so we have it for a rainy day. That tastes too good. I think I'm just going to eat it right now. And in my defense, you can't run a V8 on a gallon of gas. So, you know, you got to take advantage of it when you can. So, I mean, it's been an awesome conversation with you guys tonight. I did get a couple of emails from people today, but I'm not going to read them because we're running long. But I want to thank those two people. So Sarah from Montana and Mike from Texas. Mike from Texas writes on a very frequent basis. And I appreciate you guys sending those emails after we published the situation report this morning. Definitely appreciate that. Bottom line is what we've discussed here tonight, that there's lots of different attack vectors for people like the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, but this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It doesn't mean we shouldn't be prepping. It's kind of ironic that I'm wearing a Mira Safety prepper t-shirt tonight. But at the end of the day, we do know that the Chinese are deeply embedded university research facilities, networks. It's crazy how we've let them basically walk across our border and get their hooks into everything. So with all of that being said, I want to give a shout out today to the news article of the day. It's my friend Roger Moore from Texas. Nancy Pelosi outraged after Defense Secretary Hegseth orders removal of gay icon's name from naval ship. And normally we give the person props and we carry on, but I love getting feedback from both of you. So tell me, Major, what are your thoughts on Hegseth saying, take the gay stuff down?
No, I'm so glad he is. I was about to make a snide remark about the Navy crossing the equator ceremonies, but my dad was Navy, so I'll just pass on that. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Also with the SEALs, in so much trouble these days and failing so poorly, and all the Latrell lies and everything. No, it's great. Nobody wants to be on a ship like that. You want to, I was on the Iwo Jima. That's cool. That's inspiring. You don't want to, I think it's milk they're talking about. Was that who they're talking about? Yeah. That's definitely a step in the right direction.
So we had a bunch of Pete Hegseth's friends on when he was running for the nomination. Bill Brown, who's the SEAL who founded the New York SEAL Swim, et cetera, et cetera. And without any, formal SOP put together, these are multiple different interviews I had with them. They all came back to the same thing: lethality. We've got to restore the lethality of our military. And I don't think that what you do in your bedroom has anything to do with lethality, whether you're heterosexual, homosexual, or something else. And I think that getting this stuff out of the military, out of all institutions for that matter, and going back to just merit-based stuff is the right way to go. Jeff, I'm going to give you the final kick at the can here in case you want to piss off any progressive woke liberals.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're going to name a boat after somebody, Harvey Milk is not your guy. He was in the Navy and he was dishonorably discharged for homosexual activity, and he's a pedophile. He had a 16-year-old live-in lover. Okay, this is not someone who should be lionized. This is someone who should have been in prison. But because he was a gay icon in California, they name a boat after him.
Unreal. All right. Well, last reminder of the day, if you go to survivaldispatchnews.com and grab a Guardian membership, it's only $7.99 a month or $74.99 for the year. You get 2.5 months for free when you do that. Works out to 21 cents per day. Benefits include you get added to our Survival Dispatch emergency notification system. You get 6 full daily sit reps each week. You get access to behind the scenes content, early access to content, 37 survival e-magazines that we typically charge $9.99 a piece for, the Sunday threat matrix, and access to our high traffic private signal chat. If you don't want to join, that's okay. If you don't want to join as a paying member, definitely join as a free member though, because you get our Saturday watch guide. And when I look at statistics from all the different platforms that we send stuff out to, what I see on CommieTube consistently is somewhere between 0 and 1.5% of our views come from notifications. So the vast majority of our 432,000 subscribers on YouTube are not getting notified when we publish content. And that's the easiest way for big tech to suppress somebody like us who, you know, tells the truth over lies, like the lamestream, legacy media, whatever you want to call them. That watch guide lists everything we publish for the week, every platform it's been published to, with links. And that way you'll never, ever miss an episode whatsoever. Randy Nance and I will be back tomorrow evening with Lieutenant Colonel Ricardo Bossi, the head of Australia One Party, which is their equivalent to MEGA. I want to thank all of our subscribers, our vendor partners who make all of this work possible. We literally spend countless hours researching, verifying everything we can to bring you the truth that the legacy media won't touch. And without your support, we couldn't keep fighting the information war that's critical to saving our republic and our American Christian heritage. Each subscription matters. Every share matters. Every comment helps us. Each like on every video helps us. Let me quickly tell you that Dave Kemp and John from Righteous Savages and Survival Dispatch as well flew in late Sunday, got very little sleep. We drove across the state to Waft. We trained all day long. We shot an enormous amount of content. We recorded a bunch of roundtable discussions. We got back here on the East Coast at 1 a.m. in the morning, and they left at 4:30 in the morning to catch their flight out of Orlando to fly back to Chicago, then Marion, Illinois, and then a 2-hour drive after that. That's what I mean. The type of hours we all put in is pretty extreme in this stuff. So Major Prather, I want to thank you once again. I promise you, one of these days when there's no other crazy stuff in the news, we're going to do an episode strictly on weapons, especially pistols and rifles that you have just an absolute ton of knowledge on. And I can't wait to do that episode, but you know, we just came up with this false flag, so we had to deal with it tonight. So, and Jeff, of course, always appreciate your time and insight on everything. I remind everybody out there, we're not just broadcasting the news, we're building a movement of informed Americans who refuse to let our country be destroyed by enemies, foreign and domestic. And I would urge you to stay vigilant, stay prepared, keep fighting for the America our founders envisioned. And God bless America.